get his insight on Greece and Latin America, I was joined by Steve Hanke. Steve is a professor of applied economics at Johns Hopkins University and director of the Troubled Currency Project at the Cato Institute. Now, I first asked him how the Troika should approach the new Greek government in negotiations. Take a look at what he had to say.
Well, I think the Troika should hold the Greeks to the obligations that the Greeks agreed to originally. I mean, they were reasonable, and they were given a big break to begin with, the Greeks, and they basically haven't followed through on anything. But this is, you have to realize we're talking about a Balkan country here. Greece is in the Balkans. So those are the kinds of deals you get in the Balkans. And if you look at the obligations, if you look at doing business, the World Bank report, doing business, as I recall, Greece, the reliability of Greece relative to following through on contract obligations, this is private contracts, I think they rank 155 out of 183 countries. So you know, that's what you're dealing with. What can I say?
Since creating democracy, they've been cruising, is what you're saying.
They've been cruising, and unfortunately, even before they joined the Euro zone, as you know, they were forced to join a little bit later than the initial launch, and the reason for that is that they were diddling the books so much and phoning up the books, and Eurostat knew this, but of course it was politically covered over, and that is more or less how this thing is going to muddle through going forward. It'll be exactly like the entry of Greece into the Eurozone. Everyone knew they'd cooked the books, but politically they were wanted as a member of the club, so it was pushed under the rug. So there'll be lots of things pushed under the rug going forward too.
Now, obviously, we've spoken to the finance minister, Yanis Varoufakis, numerous times on this program before he was appointed to his new position as finance minister of Greece. So let me play you a clip from one of those interviews. I'd like to get your take on this. So here we go.
The expenditure, the recurrent expenditure of the Greek state has gone down. But when you are bankrupt, and you keep borrowing in order to pretend that you're not bankrupt, then your expenditure in the form of interest payments and principal payments skyrockets, so you lose control.
Now, what are your thoughts on what Varoufakis had to say there?
They've lost control a long time ago. It has nothing to do with interest payments. This is a card game and a shell game that they're playing. Since 2006, the government expenditures in Greece have gone up by about 10%. And the economy since 2006 has contracted by about 15%. So as a result, there's been no austerity. The government expenditures in absolute terms have gone up. And of course, in relative terms, the government size has exploded from about 45% of the economy to about 60% of the economy. So this is, you just have to look at the numbers and stop paying attention to all these people who are too clever by half.
All right, Steve, moving on to other emerging market countries, what's going on in Venezuela right now? Talk to me about that.
Well, they're high. And number one, their inflation rate is up at about 145%. So they're in a very high state of inflation. The highest one in the world right now is in Venezuela. And the bolivar, the currency, is, evaporates. Basically, it has evaporated, and whatever value is left is being dissipated very quickly. So they're in really dire straits. The oil price has gone down, and the Venezuelans have never saved anything, and they have no safety net of any to rely on. So they're in bad shape. I mean, they've got the Chinese have come in and give them a little lifeline, but it's not much. So they're going from bad to worse. To make a long story short, on my misery index calculation, which adds inflation, unemployment, the bank lending rate, and then you subtract the GDP growth. Well, actually, they're contracting, but you subtract the GDP growth if there is positive growth, and you get a misery index. And they're way up in the triple digits and worst in the world. The second worst is Argentina.
I'm glad that you bring up Argentina because I want to ask you about that next. But first, I want to say just, point blank, do you think the Venezuelan regime can last given the inflation and precipitous drop in hard currency revenues from oil exports?
It's very hard to predict these things because look at a place like, if we go to the second highest hyperinflation in the world history, it culminated in 2008 in Zimbabwe, where the prices were doubling every 24 hours, and we've got President Mugabe is, over 90 years of age, and he's still in the saddle. He stays a long time. So you never know. We had a hyperinflation in Serbia, in the old Yugoslavia, the rump Yugoslavia, and Milosevic stayed around for, it took a war and all kinds of things to finally dislodge Milosevic. So the economy had completely collapsed and he stayed in power. So it's very hard to predict these things. I just say it's miserable there in Venezuela, and they're in a corner politically, but whether they're going to stay or not, I wouldn't be one to predict.
And you mentioned Argentina before. I want to go back to that. Would you update us on what's happening in Argentina right now?
It remains, one bad economic decision after another. You've got a left-wing government in there that can't shoot straight, and they just a lot of endemic inflation, a lot of corruption, a lot of bad economic policies, and they're just in trouble.
That was Steve Hanke, professor of applied economics at Johns Hopkins University and director of the Troubled Currency Project at the Cato Institute.